The problem with interviews, December 5th, 2022. With massive layoffs in high technology sectors, programming, and so forth this year, this is the first in a series of short videos sharing some of my experience in looking for a job. The problem with interviews. The job interview, remains the main way that companies and employees find each other. I've done many interviews over my career, both seeking a job and also in some cases hiring or attempting to hire someone. Interviews are very inaccurate. The correlation, fancy term, between your impression from the interview of what your job will be like, whether it will work out, or in the case of an employer, what the employee will be like, how things will work out, and what actually happens is very low. It is probably positive in the sense that more often than not, it's sort of in the direction you expect, but it's very unreliable. This is one of the reasons that both companies and employees, at least if they are experienced, will try to find a job or find an employer or find an employee through other people that they have worked with for an extended period of time successfully. This is really the so-called hidden job market. The hidden job market is mostly not somebody from your bowling club or a neighbor that you chat with occasionally, or even people you meet through professional organizations or activities and may have worked with briefly on a nonprofit basis or volunteer, those kinds of things. The most reliable, and it's not perfectly reliable either, way of evaluating the likelihood that someone's going to work out, that a job will work out, is that you've already worked with at least one of the people that you're going through to get the job or to get the employee. In other words, someone can vouch for the company. It says, I've worked here for 2 years now and it's a really great place, or that sort of thing. Or in the case of an employee, again, someone who's working at the company can vouch for you, and that is the most likely to succeed. It is not guaranteed to succeed either, but it's probably significantly more reliable than a straight job interview between people who basically don't know each other very well in a work setting. Why does this happen? Even a very thorough interview process, which might take a couple of full days. You might go in for an all-day interview, 8 hours, for example, with several people at the company. They evaluate you. They say, oh, you seem pretty good, but we want you to come back and talk to us again, to some more people. And you really go through a lot. And today that would probably, for programmers and people like that, include a rather grueling coding or algorithm interview. I question in many ways the effectiveness of these coding interviews, but that's often part of the process currently. Didn't used to be. So the problem is this is actually a very brief period of time to be interviewed. Now, there are many, many books for job seekers and also some for employers on how to present your best face, how to put together a good resume that looks good, how to answer these questions. Today, employees practice and learn how to come across well in interviews. It tends to be very subjective. All sorts of factors that shouldn't influence the decision do. And as a result, how well can you know somebody based on a first impression, based on even a couple of days of hanging out with them? It's not that much. Now, sure, sometimes there'll be red flags that will really indicate, well, this is not a good match. It happens. In some cases, in an interview, you can evaluate that, for example, the employee perhaps is just not at the technical level to do the work. Or conversely, the employee would-be employee may be able to tell, actually, this is not the job for me. It's not what I'm interested in, or indeed, I'm at a substantially higher technical level in some cases. So some things you probably, with a careful, thorough interview process, can pick up. But they make up a small fraction of the issues. And a major issue is just the fit, the personalities, and factors like that, values, goals, unwritten rules. This is very hard to quantify, very hard to identify. In other words, actually having worked with people for a long period of time, you know and understand more about what their expectations are, all these kinds of things. Therefore, the basic conclusion is your interview isn't a very reliable indicator. Does that have any implications? I think one implication is to be biased in favor. If you are fortunate enough to have a couple job offers at the same time, which often happens actually, probably you should pick the one that pays the best. If you really don't know these people, you haven't worked with them for an extended period of time, I would argue at least a year, probably it's best to remember the old adage that cash is king and take the better paying one. Now, again, your situation, there may be some special reasons. I'm not saying this is an absolute rule. What do you do if you just have a bad feeling about one of the jobs and you can't really identify what's causing the bad feeling? Well, I would try to sort of meditate on that bad feeling and see if you can pull out why your mind is having a bad reaction. And if you can verbalize rationally why you have a bad feeling and that matches up with the bad feeling, that's the best situation. It, of course, can be completely wrong, but in that case, going with the feeling is easy, the intuition. I can't cite any specific scientific studies about intuition. I can say that my personal experience and anecdotally, my feeling is if you have a bad feeling, and strong bad feeling about a job, but otherwise it looks great, you know, they're offering a lot of money, there's all these other things, probably you should go with a bad feeling. Very often in that situation, something will come up after you take the job, somehow wasn't communicated, they lied, they just weren't very good at telling you things. I mean, I've had jobs, not very long-lived jobs, but have had the situation where the job was not what was described in the interview process. And I've met many people who've had that experience. Whatever the cause of that, whether it's lying or miscommunication, it does happen. And often in those cases, well, I don't know how often, but you will sometimes get a bad feeling about those situations before you take the job. So overall, you have to remember that interviews are a very crude method, very unscientific, unproven in many ways mechanism of trying to select a job. That means you can't really count that that job's going to work out until you've been at that employer probably for at least 6 months, maybe longer. So the rule of thumb is that you're in a trial period for the first 6 months, even if they don't have an explicit trial period. That's sort of how the mind works in people. They say, well, we'll try out the new guy for 6 months. So again, you have to be very careful in that first 6 months. And as an employer, you're in the same boat too. That employee is evaluating you. And if you really want them, you need to think about how to treat them during that 6 month period of time, how to onboard them effectively and avoid problems. Again, an interview process is very short. Everybody is sort of on their best behavior. It's very easy to miscommunicate what a job actually is. Perhaps the circumstances just changed and you didn't warn them in advance that you have a very volatile environment where things are changing unpredictably. There are many of these things. So in conclusion, you're going to have to do interviews unless you have a very special situation. They tend to be grueling if you actually get an offer. They tend to turn into at least 3-4 hours, sometimes a couple of days, as I mentioned, in more thorough interviews. And unfortunately, it's not a very reliable process, and you have to be prepared for that. You have to realize that even though you get the job, you're going to go through a period of getting settled. It may simply not work out for various reasons. Plan for that.
This concludes this video presentation. If you like this video, please click like. Please click subscribe and the notification bell if you would like to receive more content from us. You can avoid internet censorship by subscribing directly to our RSS news feed. Please consider sharing the link by email and on your website or blog, in addition to liking, upvoting, or sharing on increasingly censored, advertising beholden, big company social media. We have encountered such censorship. Mathematical software is developing algorithms and software to automate data analysis, reducing the risks of costly errors and increasing the predictive power of the results. You can support our work financially by subscribing on our Patreon page, https://www.patreon.com/mathsoft, or scanning the QR code in the lower right corner.